The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome, good people of the Bronx and beyond. My name is Henry Ovalles, and I'm your host for Life in Art. On this show, we will bring you engaging and personal conversations with artists with whom you may not be familiar, people who have been working on their craft for at least a decade and are at a crossroads where passion meets necessity. We'll discuss creativity and inspiration with our guest artists, but also find out what it takes to balance the struggles of practical life while pursuing their passions. Our guest today is a writer, actor, arts and education consultant, teaching artist, and public speaker. Comic book enthusiasts may know his work for DC Comics' Batman books, or perhaps the several Scooby-Doo tales he has chronicled, as well as his work with Archie Comics, for which he received the 2010 Glyph Best Writer Award. He is also the founder of Kids Comic Con and the art exhibition known as The Color of Comics. Today we learn about Alex Simmons' life in art. And here we are in the studio with Alex Simmons. Thank you so much for joining us, Alex.
My pleasure. You offered food.
Wait a minute. Let's check the contract on that. So we met actually a couple of years ago. Our connection is through Dante Alberti, who's a director and my boss, whom you've worked with back in his Belmont Italian-American Playhouse days.
Many moons ago.
Yeah, so I've seen you as an actor in a couple of productions, and a few weeks ago we actually shared the stage in a reading.
It was fun. You showed me up.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. But there's just so much to you. The intro that we just read doesn't do you justice. So let's see if we could try to get in at least some of it in this interview. And let's start at the beginning. Alex, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Wow. Oh, forget the log cabin story. I was born here in New York City. I'm actually born and raised here in New York. At the time, I was born in Metropolitan Hospital on Roosevelt Island. As a matter of fact, the structure is still there, somewhat bleak looking, but it's still there. And I started out in Harlem, first 7 years of my life. And then my moms and I moved just south of that to the West 90s, off Broadway, Amsterdam. I went to Joan of Arc Junior High School there, where I met some really cool people. And I met one of my mentors, which I'll just very quickly, thank you, Carol. She was one of my teachers, but she went on to become a consultant in arts and education, and she's one of the people that sort of helped guide me into doing work in that area. So I still keep contact with some of my friends, and yes, one or two of my teachers from that time.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
And as far as family life, any siblings?
No, Mom did this, and she went never again. No, I'm an only child, which gave me hours and hours of imagination time and playing with my action figures, not dolls now, action figures. Action figures, right. Captain America, G.I. Joe, all that, Johnny West. But I had a very active imagination. I did a lot of drawing and writing, and I had these characters, and I would make up all these stories. And my mom, bless her, never thought this kid is crazy. Well, maybe she thought it, but she didn't hold that as a negative. She, encouraged me to explore my imagination as long as I took care of schoolwork, and I became, in her eyes, a decent person, a decent human being. But she encouraged me. She encouraged my writing, my drawing, and everything, and I really thank her for that.
That's fantastic. And how about your father? Was he in the picture at all?
No. Dad was one of those individuals, which unfortunately falls into the statistics of black men leaving, the household before taking responsibility. And in one way, he did me a service, because by doing that, it became something I knew I would never do.
Right.
I knew what it felt like not to have a dad there. And the sort of strange part of it is I fooled a lot of educators in the day, and they had me in what they call the intelligent and gifted classes in some of my schools. So I was literally throughout elementary school, except for 1 year, I was the only black kid in my class. And so I was going to school with a lot of upper middle class or middle class families, and predominantly white, Jewish, Asian, Zen Kurokawa and a couple other people, names still in the head. Wow. But I would go to their homes, for after school or whatever, and there'd be two parents. And, I would go home and there would be Mom, but Mom, she did absolutely her best. But I knew if I ever have children, they were going to know their father. So Dad tipped. The quick story there is my mom, being the wonderful human being that she was, did not allow me to grow up being angry and vengeful about my father leaving us. And I couldn't understand why, you know, because he ran out in a hurry, ran on me. And then one day we got word, I was still fairly young, that he'd passed. And the way that he passed was very tragic. And I remember feeling sorry for him. And then I got it. Yeah, that the anger and just the whole getting even doesn't serve you. You know, you gotta think forward. You gotta move forward in a positive way. And I thank my mom for not letting me develop that bitterness. You know, so good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah,
you know.
seems like a fantastic human being. Is she still with us, your mom?
No, unfortunately, she left 2 years ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And thank you. And went out still teaching a lesson because she passed on the very day that she was born around the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just like, she made a reservation, you know. It's just, you know, but again, she left me with a lot of compassion and understanding and you know, just a desire to give something back to the people who were there for me, but also to try and help move forward some of the folks that are coming up, you know, through some of the same struggles I faced.
I can't think of a better lesson. And what line of work was your mother in?
My mom's didn't. No, she had health issues, major
see.
health issues. So her focus was taking care of me, making sure I came out okay. Yeah, I did, Mom, really, trust me. And really after that, her health just kept getting worse. And by the time I graduated high school, she had to go into a nursing home.
I see.
And so from that point, 1970 to 2 years ago, she was in a nursing home.
Wow.
Yeah, and again, still teaching lessons about, you know, what it is to set an example for your children, a positive example, because I tell this story every now and then when I do presentations. I was leaving the nursing home one year around Christmas time, and I was, you know, feeling kind of funky because I'm leaving Mom there, and you know, just and one of the orderlies came up to me and he says, "I need to tell you something." He says, "You know, sometimes we be standing around here, we be complaining about this, complaining about that, and we see your mama come around the corner in the wheelchair, and she can't see, she can't hear, but she's gonna go visit people who can't leave their room because she wants to make sure they don't feel alone, and we thinking, what the hell we got to complain about?" And it just went, okay, I get it, I get it, I get it.
I could only imagine how that hit you.
Oh
yeah, and how
man,
proud
I
you
was
must
like,
have
that
felt.
was a Christmas gift. That was a Christmas gift because I realized, yeah, no matter what, she just kept, you know, and so no matter what hits me, I got to keep, you know, moving forward,
Right.
you know, until you can't.
So tell me, Alex, when did art come into your life?
Childhood, childhood. My belief system is that kids come into the world curious and willing to try and explore and do all the things, and if you encourage that and support that, you're just amazed what will come out. I love drawing. I used to watch cartoons and movies and things, and I always wanted to play act, to role, you know, play roles and things, create stories and characters and draw. So I did my own, you know, make-believe characters. I made my own costumes. I drew like crazy, Huckleberry Hound and all the other cartoon figures. And I made up my own stories. And so literally I can remember doing something like a painting for my grandmother. I must have been about 7.
Also very early on.
Yep, and she put that on the wall, and for about 15 years wouldn't take it down no matter what I said. You know, there's this picture of Mighty Mouse chasing a cat, and I'm like, "Mom, Grandma, come on, take that off the wall." "No, you did that for me, that's mine, you can't touch it." Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's actually take this opportunity to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to dig deeper into how you went from self-taught to what happens later in your career.
I'll wait here.
Very well. We'll be right back with more about Alex when we return.
Teachers today are finding new ways to instill old lessons, proving that greatness can be found in everyday places and that you don't need to be famous to be unforgettable.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
Welcome back to A Life in Art. We're here with writer, actor, and teaching artist Alex Simmons. So Alex, we had left off you talking about that art really came with you in childhood. You were sort of born with it and had those inclinations very early on. So then what happens after you're 7 years old and, you know, drawing Mighty Mouse and Huckleberry?
I got old. Again, encouragement. Aside from my mother, there was a point in junior high, Joan of Arc Junior High School, Upper West Side. was my last year, and I really hadn't thought about what high school I wanted to go to. I was still very much interested in art. I was still drawing and doing a lot of stuff like that. And my art teacher, Mr. Purr, came to me and he said, you know, what high schools are you going to apply for? And I said, I hadn't thought about it, you know. But he said, I want you to try for music and art and design. And he named a couple of others. And I said, okay, fine, you know. So he said, go see your advisor, talk to her, get some feedback, and then, you know, we'll start working on that. So I went to see this person, and she basically told me there was no way I would ever make it into any of them. Just no, I don't even know why you even bother. She wasn't nasty, but she was like really just boom, that was it. There's no way, you're not gonna make it.
Was it something specifically about you, or just that she was more of a practical person that felt that art?
You'll find out at the end of the story.
Okay.
So I'm a storyteller. What do you want? So I go back to the classroom. Same day, I go back to the classroom, Mr. Purr's class. You know, it's starting, and he comes and he said, "Did you see Miss So-and-so?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And she said, "There's no reason for me to apply because I'll never make it." And he looked sort of stunned, and he left the room. And we're setting up to start class, and the teacher leaves the room. And I'm thinking, okay, you know, errand to run, whatever. Comes back, and maybe like, I don't know, 10 minutes later, if that, and he takes off his jacket. He used to wear those jackets with the wonderful suede patch on it.
Of course.
Takes off his jacket, he says, "We're going to be working on your portfolio." I'm thinking, what did I do, man? Why are you so, you know, tense and everything? Didn't get it. We worked on my portfolio. I applied to both high schools, music and art design, and I made it into both, right? And I come back and I tell him, and he's all excited. He says, "Go tell Miss So-and-so." So now I'm starting to, okay, there's something going on here. So I go in and I go, you know, Miss So-and-so, I just want to tell you, I did apply to art, design, music, and art. And she goes, mm-hmm. I said, and I made it into both. Thank you very much. And I walked out. She had this stunned look on her face. A few years later, I found out she had said things like that to a number of people who didn't need copper tone.
Ah, I see. And what years are we talking about here? This would be in the...
Well, if you really want to tell my age, we're talking late 60s.
Okay.
Late 60s, yeah.
So there was a lot going on there.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
that
yeah.
time.
All over the country. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on.
Indeed.
You know.
So right away then with art and drawing, when does storytelling happen, and writing and acting?
Well, I went through high school thinking that I was going to become a comic book illustrator because, you know, I love comics, cartoons, that sort of thing. And I did acting and performing for the fun of it, and came out of high school with some people going, "You really should think about getting an agent, and maybe you'd like to do this and do that." So I thought, well, what the heck, you know? Let me explore that too, you know. And I went in to see a couple of agents and did auditions, and they liked me, and so I started doing some plays around New York. Nothing. You know, no Broadway, you know, no major money making. But I'd always enjoyed performing. I hadn't thought of it as a career move. And I was finding as I was exploring that, I was doing less and less drawing. And then what happened was, again, we're talking now early 70s, you had Sounder, the movie, you know, where you're exploring plantation life and slaves and the downtrodden black man or Negro or colored, depending on which name they were going to use at that time. And then you had Shaft and Slaughter's Big Ripoff and, you know, all Jim Brown and all these guys. So we had those, and we didn't have a whole lot going on in between. And I would go to auditions, and unless it said white person, I'd go to an audition because as far as I was concerned, I could play certain types of characters. And that began to become interesting because people would say, well, we can't see, well, we hadn't thought about a black, and I'm thinking, okay, so they're stuck in a mindset. I needed more material, so I started writing, and I wrote a couple of plays and monologues, but the one play that I wrote was Sherlock Holmes in the Hands of Othello. This is the first major length play that I'd ever written. And it took my love of Sherlock Holmes and the fact that in real life there was an actor named Ira Aldridge, who was a black actor in the early 1800s and actually went to Europe and became a continental success, and he died around 1865. He's got a seat at Stratford-on-Avon. He's
oh, wow.
You know, yeah. So I merged those two. So you learned about Ira, but it was a Sherlock Holmes mystery, and that sort of made me feel like my writing was really stronger and the direction I really wanted to explore more. So I spent the next few years writing and performing, but mostly writing.
I see. And what do you say then that you discovered that was your major passion, and is it still?
Yeah. I enjoy writing, but I really, I'm sort of a, you know, in theater they have the thing called a triple threat where you're a singer, dancer, actor.
Yes.
Yeah, multiply that by 3 more. You know, I enjoy writing. I really enjoy performing. Drawing is nice, you know, directing is cool. I love that. I'll produce a show, you know, in a heartbeat if it's an exciting program. So basically, I like creating. I enjoy creating. And unless I can't do a thing, I don't see any reason not to try.
I see.
You know, and so to me, I've done plays, I've written songs, I've performed, I've actually drawn some things, but I also have produced and published comic books and novels. I've worked for Archie Comics, which, you know, here's my Archie here with Chuck Clayton and one of their black characters, but I've also done work with all their regular characters, but then I've also created, you know, my own series of Blackjack, which is an African-American soldier fortune in the 1930s. So you can entertain and you can educate at the same time, and that's sort of what I enjoy doing, is taking the creative arts and using it not only to entertain but also to inform.
Right. That's, I mean, it's, yeah, art and not just for the sake of entertainment, but you know, with the strong foundation and the base, which now understanding a little bit more of your backstory and your biography, I could understand where that comes from.
I'm glad you can, because I'm totally confused.
still,
Yeah, right.
still working on that, huh?
Yeah.
So then tell me, as you wrote your first play, and then when do you start writing comics as opposed to just drawing?
Okay, so the first play got produced. There's a long story there I won't go into now, but it was an adventure. And then I knew people in the comic book world since I was a teenager. I mentioned Don McGregor, who has written The Black Panther, he's written Kill Raven, he's written some other stuff for Marvel and Warren. So I met him when I was 18, he was 20-something. And through him, when he eventually started working for Marvel, I got introduced to Stan Lee and a lot of those guys, and Johnny Romita Sr. So I was sort of involved in that world, and every now and then I would take a shot at trying to write something, and sometimes it, you know, people go, oh, that's pretty good, but you need work. So I was always sort of fiddling around with it. But it was the 1980s, mid-80s, when I created Blackjack, when I came up with this character, and I wrote the first full-length story on him and took it to Dick Giordano at DC Comics, and he liked it, and he mentored me through the rest of that. And we almost had a deal there at DC, and then things changed. So it sort of went into hibernation for a few years, and then through an independent source, I began to develop the property as an independent comic, and that was my first publication. So that would be 1996.
I see.
You know, but prior to that, I hadn't done a whole lot in comics. I'd written a couple of things here and there, but nothing, you know, nothing monumental.
All right, so I think that's actually a great point for us to take our second break, and when we come back for our last segment, I want to dig a little bit deeper into how that world works, because I'm very unfamiliar with it. How do you get published in comics, and well, how is it different to do it independently as opposed to, you know,
working for the big dogs?
Exactly,
yeah,
right.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's hold on that, and we'll be right back with more from Alex right after this break.
I already knew that I was going to go to college, you know, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science, become the mayor or something, make the situation better for other people. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.
Today, 1 out of every 4 American kids is Hispanic. Many of the future doctors who will care for us, the scientists and entrepreneurs of our country, can be your kids. And the Hispanic Scholarship Fund helps you prepare, plan, and pay for your kids' college education.
And we're back on A Life in Art with Alex Simmons. So let's get into it, Alex. I'm very ignorant in how it works with the comic book world. I appreciate them, but I sort of spent my tween and teen years in the Dominican Republic, so I didn't have as much access to comics.
That may have saved your life. You never know. You know.
So. So talk to me about the process. You know, you love comics, you read comics, then you start writing and drawing. How do you get published, and how do you start to meet Stan Lee and all of these folks?
Well, to condense, my life, as I said again, I met Don McGregor, a buddy of mine at that time, back in the 70s, and he eventually got work writing and editing for Marvel Comics, so I could go up to see him. I started to meet some of the other, at that time, you know, the names, the Marv Wolfmans and Stan Lee and Dick Giordano and Maurice Severance and some of the other names. And you know, comics were always something I enjoyed. I read them and all that, and as I mentioned, I drew. So it was, for me, there was that portion of my life where I was pursuing the idea of becoming a comic book illustrator, not really a writer. I wasn't thinking of myself as a writer at that point. And through the exposure of working with these people, Doug Minch and some of the others, you know, I learned certain techniques from them and their process, but again, still wasn't thinking of myself as a writer. And Don and I did the first issue of Detectives Incorporated, which was a comic that he created, an independent. And we actually published that, self-published. So this is pre, Create Space and all these online things that you could use. So literally you do the drawings and everything, you go to a print shop or a Xerox copy place, and you come out and you staple everything together, and that was it. So we had this beautiful high pink cover, bright pink cover with the heroes drawn on the front and in black and white interior. And we went to a Comic-Con and we were trying to sell it and everything. And Don, over the years after that, developed it through professional channels, and it was published by, oh boy, an independent house which name just went right, Eclipse Comics.
Okay.
And so Don's progressed through the comic book world. I went into acting and spent a lot of time writing and drawing and writing and performing in acting. But I never lost my interest in comics. So in the 80s, I came up with this concept of an African-American soldier of fortune in the 1930s. I liked the serial era, the cliffhangers and adventure and exploring the world. And I knew that blacks, as well as other people of color, had sort of been had been totally misrepresented in a lot of the old films and stories, or totally left out. So I thought here was a chance of taking my enthusiasm and interest in that arena and my love of the genre and create a character who could move through that and also bring forth a little bit of history and maybe a little bit better representation of other cultures. So I did the first script, took it to Dick Giordano at DC Comics, hoping DC would do it. And Dick loved the project and mentored me through it, but DC didn't do the project. They stuck with the Shadow and Doc Savage and some more well-known characters already established from that era, also white. But so that went that way, and for a few years it looked like Blackjack wasn't going to happen. And then a couple of independent opportunities came up, and eventually they didn't come to pass. And I then found a backer. And he footed the expense, and we published the first series ourselves. It was a mini-series, Blackjack, Second Bite of the Cobra. Well, there was a whole lot of attitude about, prior to that, oh, well, it's a small niche, only people in the ghetto will be buying this, small market, blah, 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 blah. We started getting fan mail, literally, from Cairo to Copenhagen.
Wow.
So I'm trying to figure out where the brother's hanging in Copenhagen, Yeah. But what that said to me was that my belief was I hadn't written it just for a black audience. I had written it for the world, and here was a character who the lead was black.
Right.
And it showed me that as long as you did your best and you got it out there, it would find its own home. And so that's what happened. So we were able to do Second Bite of the Cobra, which is a miniseries, and then the second miniseries was Blood and Honor, and we did that originally as individual issues. And then we changed our mind halfway through, and we made it a graphic novel. And both of them went out there and did really, really well. I didn't become a superstar in comics, so I was still pursuing other forms of art and career and performing and all of that. And the comics slowly began to sort of fade into the background.
I see.
Right? Partly because, again, DC, Marvel, the big dogs at that time, were the gatekeepers, and if you didn't blow up and become part of their stable, then it wasn't working. But because of the internet, because of online printing, because of the fact that you can go through Amazon, all these doors opened up, and so a lot of people now are creating comic book properties as well as prose, and are able to self-publish. It's not even considered vanity press anymore. It's a viable entity that you can actually get your work out there. I still push for quality. I work with good people, Chris Ryan, Elizabeth Sheehan, James Brown, not James Brown the singer now, there's a colorist I know named James Brown, godfather of color. But but I work with good people, and we have a professional standard that we go for. I just worked with, I'm going to pull this one up here too.
Yeah, sure.
This is the graphic novel that just came out, Blackjack, There Came a Dark Hunter, and this was with the artist Tim Fielder. But Tim did this totally, he did all the art on computer. So he actually illustrated it and colored it, and we did the lettering and everything on computer. It's all on computer. Amazing. So that's where we are now. We're in this techno universe. You can still do it old school, but you can also do it in a technological base.
Absolutely.
And it just makes so many things possible, so much more possible.
Yeah, and there's so many more doors open, and that's
exactly.
So talk to me, Alex, about the difference of, let's say, your level of enthusiasm with doing something like this that is so personal and so yours, as opposed to the success that you've had when, all of a sudden you're writing for the big guys like Archie and you get an opportunity to work, on Batman and Scooby-Doo and things like that.
Well, the kid in me, which is alive and well, I will tell you that right now, the kid in me was just thrilled to be working on characters that I grew up with.
Right.
From Archie to Sherlock Holmes to Tarzan, I've actually written material that's been published for these characters that I've known since I was conscious. And that's exciting and that's fun. My own material is closer to heart, but I maintain the same standard. You don't half-step with something that somebody else owns and then do 100% with your own. If you're trying to set your reputation and the quality of your work, you give 100% across the board. So in that respect, whether I'm doing Batman or Blackjack doesn't matter to me, as long as I do the best job I possibly can. It's exciting for me to see people get excited about my work, my character, because that says something more to me. But I don't want people to go, oh, your Blackjack was like, really great, but the Batman, oh God, because that still hurts. Yeah. My Archie, it's how can you do Archie? I said, well, use a computer. The reality is, Archie, you got to know your characters, you got to want to do the job right. Do the best you can.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's still your name on it.
Exactly.
And you have to serve the characters as well.
And also, if you're trying to make a living at this, you don't want people to think that you'll only do your own stuff well, because they're not going to pay you to do theirs.
Right.
And if you want to be able to build a career, you do 100% no matter what the job. That builds your rep. And it eventually affects how much money you get paid, because the better you are, the more money you get.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that'll actually lead us to our last questions, because unfortunately we've run out of time. I wanted to talk more about Kids Comic Con and Colored Comics,
okay.
But we'll put your website up so that we could.
Yes, I created a Kids Comic Convention. Boom, there you go. Okay.
So that our viewers can check that out.
Yeah.
So just we like to end with, if you had it to do over again, would you choose a life in art, and what advice would you give, and yourself as an educator as well, what advice would you give to someone else coming up that wants to do what you do?
Okay. Yes, I would do it again in a heartbeat, because I'm crazy, but I would do it smarter. Artists tend to ignore the business end of things, because we're artists. We want to create. Business is just as important. You need to set standards in terms of timing. You got to do things on schedule. You've got to make sure the quality is up. You definitely got to handle your finances, and look at how am I going to earn an income from this? What can I do as sort of a test or freebie or whatever, and what do I have to do to make sure I can pay the rent? And I was lacking in that arena. I was more enthusiastic about the creating. So I would take care of business a bit better, which would make my wife and kids, happier the next time around. But they stuck with me, they supported me, they're all great people, and I think that's the other thing you need. Get your head together, set your goals, set a structure that you can live with, learn from your mistakes, learn from mentors, and most assuredly, thank and bless the people who stand by you, because that's the way it worked for me.
Well, thank you so much, Alex, and thank you for mentoring us and sharing a little bit of your story with us. Yeah. So we're out of time, as we tend to do. We want to thank Alex for sharing his life and art with us, and thanks to all of you for joining us. We definitely want to encourage you to stay connected with us on social media. Visit us on Facebook and YouTube at A Life in Art, and Instagram and Twitter at A Life in Art TV. We'll be back with more stories from emerging artists when we return with A Life in Art.
I already knew that I was going to go to college, from a young age. I definitely want to major in political science, become the mayor or something, make the situation better for other people. My name is Justin, and I am your dividend.